the MUNHUMUTAPA state. There are some books that we encourage learners to read so that they have a clear understanding of the MUNHUMUTAPA state. The state started in 1400 and ended in 1902. So the books or references that we want learners to read are S.I.G. Mudenge, 1988, Randall's 1979, D.N. Beach 1980, D.N. Beach 1984, Zimbabwe before 900, Pikirai, Gan, Shanaiwa, Samkange and Samkange, Mafuka S. et al., and many other books that have got a lot of detail concerning the Mutapa state. Now, I want to explore on the origins of the Mutapa state. The Mutapa state is claimed to be a successor to Great Zimbabwe. The founder of the state was Mutota Nemasingere Nyatsimba. We are informed that Mutota Nemasingere Nyatsimba was the founder of the state through oral traditions. Mudenge 1988 argues that the relationship is obscure. It is not clear. He further went on to say that it is not clear how the state was found. Mutota is believed to be the son of Chibata Matotsi, the ruler of Great Zimbabwe. It is an offshoot of the Great Zimbabwe. Origins of the state. When we are looking at the origins of the state, we are looking at the background of the state. We are looking at the foundation of the state. Mutapa state could have been an independent state from Great Zimbabwe. So early similarities could have come from the civilization from Great Zimbabwe. It is believed that the civilization at Great Zimbabwe reached as far as Mozambique. Evidence for the origins is from archaeological evidence because the dating system is authentic and written sources were not clear or available. So historians had to rely on archaeology. Prior to that time, historians have relied to oral traditions. The reliability of these sources can be questionable on the origins, although they seem to point specific names and places and events. There are two evidences from oral traditions that are used to explain the origins of the state. The conquering of Great Zimbabwe army in search of salt led by Nyatsimba Mutota to the Dande area, and that army is believed to have founded the Mutapa state. According to oral traditions, before Mutota's expedition to the north, an ambassador by the name Katondo have been sent to the north to explore land south of the Zambezi, that is in the Dande Mamvuradona area, in search of salt. Now there are some questions that tend to be posed as a result of all this. What caused the leader at Great Zimbabwe to send the army to the north in search of salt? If it was shortage of salt, why couldn't he, Chibata Matotsi, import salt from the Dande region? Who communicated with the leader at Great Zimbabwe that there was salt in the Dande Valley? What were the methods used to get all this information? Now let me explore again on the Nyakatondo's expedition. The ambassador Nyakatondo was very successful, and he brought a block of salt which he handed to the king at Great Zimbabwe. He also reported that the area which was rich in ivory for trade. It was also after Nyakatondo's return that Mutota searched for his northward expedition. It was a slower process of infiltration of the Shangwe, Dande, and Chidima region by the small Karanga groups which had come from Great Zimbabwe and consisted of hunters, refugees, and adventurers. The original inhabitants included the Shangwe, Tonga, and Tavara people. Mutota, a man of outstanding abilities, rose to prominence and managed to stamp his authority over the local people. Mutota was given the title MUNHUMUTAPA, meaning the ruler of the conquered lands. Mutapa's people were also called Kore Kore, meaning the locusts or invaders. The reason being they had swept over the country so ruthless, like a swarm of locusts. Debate on the origins of the Mutapa is as a result of controversial and stick factors that need to be unpacked, as in how the state was formed. So basically the two evidences from oral traditions point out the salt theory and the role of the army in the formation of or establishment of the state. And the two evidences tend to link the origins of the state to Great Zimbabwe, for instance, the salt theory and the role of the army that was used to conquer the area. Now let me look at the rise and expansion of the state, that is the MUNHUMUTAPA state. There are basically four factors which led to the rise of the Mutapa state, namely trade, intermarriages, alliances, and military campaigns. Now I want to start with the trade. Mutota began to be interested from Muslims coming from the newly established Sultanate of Ankoke. They used the Zambezi trade route, so Mutota was interested. These Ankoke traders used to trade on ivory and gold with some Tonga and Tavara people along the Zambezi River. He used the trade to consolidate power through trade using the Muslims of East Africa. So Mutota consolidated power. He actually gained power as a result of this trade, which was lucrative, and the trade was much more pronounced as a result of these Muslims who were bringing in lively dealings or transactions with the Mutapas or the local people along the Zambezi Valley. So this actually led to the rise, expansion of the Mutapa state. That is, trade played a pivotal role. Is the king managed to consolidate or gain power through trade with the Muslims of East Africa. Now I want to look at intermarriages, how intermarriages led to the rise, expansion of the state. The Karanga were able to establish control and spread their control through intermarriages, economic intercourse, because they had made alliance with the Mombasa, Tonga, and Tavara groups. Mudenge 1988 says, relying on such networks, on relationships with marriage, kinship system, and economic contacts, reinforced and consolidated one of the Karanga clans known as Nzosamanyanga clan, which provided a number of outstanding warriors known as Nemasingere Mutota. So intermarriages basically create cordial or good relationships. So Mutota managed to use intermarriages to create good understandings with people as far as Mombasa, with people, that is the Tonga and Tavara groups, and this actually managed to legitimize Mutota's overlordship over the local people. Thereby, intermarriages led to the rise and expansion of a very strong state known as the MUNHUMUTAPA state. Now I'm going to explore on alliances. Alliances are basically understandings or friendships that are weaved between or amongst several groups. So Mutota had an alliance with the high priest called Ziwaguru, so that his control over the local people would be legitimized by the local people. The Tavara high priest Ziwaguru controlled or was believed to control the land's fertility and rainfall patterns, so any disagreements would induce drought shangwa. So listening to Ziwaguru was just as listening to Mutota. So he actually consolidated power or gained power as a result of this alliance with the Ziwaguru. Within the Shona context or within the African context, anyone who befriends a Mashikiro or spirit medium tend to be feared. In other words, people tend to respect that particular somebody. So in this particular scenario, we are having Mutota befriending Ziwaguru, a high priest who was actually believed to control the land's fertility and rainfall patterns. So there was no way the local people, that is the Tonga, the Tawara people, could reject or resist Mutota's overlordship over them. So this is how, again, Mutota managed to consolidate power, how he managed to expand his overlordship within that particular area, that is the Zambezi Valley. And lastly, I'm going to explore on military campaigns. Mutota was able to conquer the Dande, which had a rich agricultural land or good agricultural lands. Mutota won Dande. He had defeated a powerful Tavara chief called Matsiu and the chief rainmaker known as Karuva. He used the army to defeat this powerful king or chief known as Matsiu and the chief rainmaker known as Karuva. So that there is the role of the army, suppressing the opponents, and he defeated them. So Mutota was also a friend or ally of many chiefs to the west, south, and east of his kingdom, and he established his capital at Chitako Chakonya Hill, close to the Utewe River. It is near Mount Fura or Mount Darwin. So the army was used to expand the state, to instill, or can I say to enforce overlordship of the local people. And as we can see that the chief rainmaker Karuva was actually defeated and killed. Matsivu, again a powerful Tawara chief, was also defeated, thereby Mutota asserting his overlordship over the local people. And we have now the strongest foundation of a state known as the MUNHUMUTAPA state as a result of military campaigns. Now, having looked at the origins of the Mutapa states, we are going to now look at the economic activities, the economic organization of the Mutapa states. The economic organization of the Mutapa states, we are going to start with agriculture. The Mutapa people practiced agriculture, and agriculture was simply referring to the growing of crops and the rearing of animals. So I'm going to start with crop production. Agricultural production was the dominant source of subsistence in the Mutapa state throughout its history. Activities took second place to agricultural production. They cultivated 3 cereals, namely finger millet, rukweza, burash rapoko, munga, and soam, mapfunde. Agriculture tied the peasants to the land and enabled them to live a settled life. Mudenge 1988 asserts that the king owned a field called Zunde Ramambo, worked by subjects who paid tribute through labor services. Pastoralism was simply the rearing of animals. Cattle was one of the chief source of the Mutapa wealth. Cattle for the king increased due to tribute payments and reproduction. The Mtapas also raided cattle. Cattle, beside a form of storing wealth and investment, where a man can literally see his man or wealth growing, were used by the Mtapa during the war, feast, and to feed the court. Randall's 1978 says there is evidence that in the 16th century there were goats, pigs, chicken throughout the regions. Cattle were also used for mining. They could pay miners. They could buy gold using cattle. Cattle was the basis of wealth in the Mtapa kingdom. The issue of kuronzera, or ukulagisa in Ndebele, cattle leasing, is known as the linchpin or top dog or number one in the Shona culture. Mining was also an economic activity practiced during this period. They mined gold, iron, copper, tin, salt, and silver. Randall's 1978 said tin was mined, in which it was located on the High Veld. Gold was used for tribute and trade with the Muslims and the Portuguese. So the importance of minerals within the state is actually pointed, as you can see that they could use minerals to pay tribute. They could also produce some implements, especially from iron smelting, in which they could use those tools for tribute payment, for customer activities like paying lobola and so forth. Now I want to explore on elephant hunting. According to a Portuguese known as De Barros and Jaos, cited by Mudenge 1988, about 4,000 to 5,000 elephants were killed every year. They were killed for flesh or food, tusks for sale, and they caused harm to plantations of millet, rice, etc., etc. So killing of elephants was a way of controlling the population so that it won't harm the environment. Ivory was important for external trade. Tribute system was also practiced during this period within the economic realm, and generally within the African context, the payment of tribute is done to show respect, to show allegiance or dignity to the king. Agricultural produce was used to pay tribute. Agricultural labor, cultivating the zunde and kuronzera, was also some form of paying tribute. Valuable skins, for example, leopard, lion, pangolin, gold, and cattle, were also used to pay tribute to show allegiance to the king. Mudenge 1988, cattle was an easy wealth for paying such tribute. Subject people could pay tribute using girl child and pages, sons of lesser chiefs. The equivalent tax situation was basically meant to spy the lesser king's activities. This therefore points out to the fact that during the Mtapa state, there was this idea of intelligence service in the ancient times. As you can see that sons of lesser chiefs could be paid as tribute to the paramount king or chief, in which they were trained to spy the lesser chiefs, bringing the idea of intelligence service during these ancient times. Mudenge 1988 ascribes that sons of lesser chiefs were of 18 to 20 years. They then lived at the palace, and then after some time, after having been initiated in the world of spies, they could go back to where they came from. In other words, they could go back and spy lesser chiefs in terms of allegiance, in terms of dignity and respect of the paramount chief, and report back to the paramount king. I want now to explore in textile production. It was not only cotton that was produced, but also certain bugs could make cloth. The cotton was cultivated in the Zambezi Valley, in the East Bank. It was woven on a wooden frame introduced from East Africa. They used the spinning jenny. It was a machine that was imported. In other words, that was imported from East Africa, and they could make cloth as a result of that. Trade. The Mutapas also did trade with the outside world and internally. Trade was important to the state's power. It operated through the Indian Ocean, for example, Sofala in the Indian Ocean. They were Shambadzi, the middlemen. They were also known as town criers. Gold was the main export for the state. In exchange for this gold, the Mutapa obtained foreign goods such as cloth, machira, beads, and important ceramics. Imported trade routes were also improved in the kingdom, for example, Zumbo, and these were called fairas, meaning marketplaces. Most of these were located on the high veld and were also close to gold-producing areas. These included Ndandare in southwest of Zimbabwe, also Rimuka near Kadoma. Portuguese called these Marimuka. There was Masekesa near Mutare. Along the Zambezi, there was Mukarira, Zumbo, Tete, Mashangura, also Sena, and the trade routes of Zambezi linked to Quilimani route for Masekesa, linked to Sofala on the coast. Foreigners paid tax called kuva to the king. This was some form of toll gate in which it was actually handed to the king. For gold, kuva could be as high as 50%. In the 16th century, the Mutapa controlled not only political organization, but also internal and external trade within their empire. Mutapa used trade as an instrument for exerting authority on the political, social, and religious activities of his subjects, that is, common people. Mudenge 1988. Mudenge 1988 goes on to call this as the trade stimulus hypothesis. However, modern scholars challenge the trade stimulus hypothesis, which assumes that the power of the Mutapas was centered on trade. Chanaiwa radically departs from this view, pointing the bias based on the Hermetic myth. Trade was not central in the Mutapa board politic. There were also other activities which strengthened the Mutapa board politic. Now I want to look at the politics of the Mutapa. But first of all, I'm going to look at the ruling dynasty of the Mutapa state. From 1400 to 1902, there were 53 ruling dynasties. The first was Nyatsimba Mutota Nemasingere, and the last was Chioko Damba Mutute, 1890 to 1902. The period between 1400 to 1490, there is no evidence or death that shows that, or that shows the names of the Mutapa that ruled the state. During that period, the Mutapas who ruled mainly Mutota Nemasingere, short-lived, Mutota, Mamvura, Maombre, Nyauma Mukombero, Matope was responsible for building a concrete state. He initiated a vigorous conquest to build a state. Matope was the greatest conqueror and ruler of all the Mutapas. He is also best remembered as the Mutapa who distributed land to his followers. He is the only Mutapa who engaged in a successful land reform. As a conqueror, he went on to conquer all the lands on the Musengezi River, the banks of Rwenya. During his reign, Matope's authority was resisted by the Tavara around Choma. Mudenge 1988 says, Matope met stiff resistance organized by the Nari Unendoro clan. In order to conquer them, Matope used the Tavara people through bribery and threats so that he could get information on the position of the Tavara forces. This is how leaders can conquer their opponents. They can provide kickback. They can give some sweetness to their opponents. They can bribe and use threats, risky people, right? That is their opponents, so that they can get information. Once they have got information, they can actually defeat their opponents. As we can see, how Matope is manipulating the situation, and as a result, the Tavara forces were betrayed by their own people as a result of some bribery and threats that were inflicted by this leader called Matope. And eventually, the Tavara forces were defeated. They succumbed to this tactic. Only then, that is when Matope only succeeded to overcome the Tavara, he was accorded or given a praise name Mutavara, conqueror of the Tavara, as a result of this victory. Now I want to look at Nyahuma Mukombero's era. When Matope died, he was succeeded by his son Mamvura Maombwe, whose successes were not known. He ruled for a short period of time. He was succeeded by Mukombero. Mukombero conquered Uteve. It was a Nani-Mutapa region. Uteve province traded with the Muslim traders. Diago de Alcova, the Portuguese cited in Mudenge 1988, says that there was Changamire Togwa, who was a chief justice and governor of the Mutapa Empire. And Changamire Togwa owned a lot of land of his own. He is believed with these benefits, Changamire Togwa I made a lot of followers and increased wealth. This made Mukombero suspicious and wanted to eliminate him. Within the Mutapa state, there was a custom or a tradition whereby the Mutapa would order any of his vassals whom he wanted to eliminate to drink a bowl of poison, or if he refused, he would be executed. So, Changamire Togwa I refused to comply with that order and went on to fight Mukombero, in which he succeeded. He killed the emperor together with his 21 sons out of 22 sons. Changamire Togwa I went on to declare him the new Munhumutapa. So this is the fate of Nyahuma Mukombero's era. I want to look at Negomo Mapunzago II, that is from 1550 to 1880, 1889. Mapunzago II was a youthful emperor. He took the title when he was immature to rule. As a young ruler, he was assisted in running the affairs of the state by his mother and councillors. Negomo's reign is very important because it marks the beginning of Christian influence in Zimbabwe. Christianity was brought in by Father Gonzalo Surveillance in 1561. Mudenge 1988 says Gonzalo Surveillance was a nobleman who belonged to Jesus Christ, fighter of heresy, and the Protestant of Reformation. His mission was to convert the Munhumutapa into Christianity, and once he had achieved that, the Mutapa was likely to favor the Portuguese in his country and expel or reduce the influence and numbers of Muslims in his state. Father Gonzalo da Silveira managed to baptize Negomo, and he was christened Don Sebastião in honor of the then Portuguese king. Negomo's mother was christened Dona Maria. After baptizing the emperor and his mother, he was able to convert and baptize 200 to 300 people of any rank in the state. He went on to describe the Shona Mondoro and Ngangas as agents of the devil. Court dignitaries like the Boku Rumi refused to be baptized and left and felt threatened by Silveira's influence. An alliance was made by the traditional Shona religious leaders and Muslim traders and some court dignitaries to challenge Silveira's influence that threatened their roles. They said that Father Gonzalo da Silveira was a Portuguese spy and also a Moroi, a witch, because he carried with him a dead man's bone, that is the cross, and other objects to conquer the land, kill the Mutapa, and bring drought and famine in the country. This was some political conspiracy against Father Gonzalo da Silveira. So they influenced the young Mutapa, Negomo, against Silveira. A decision was made through killing him, and his body was thrown in Msengezi River. That's the fate of Father Gonzalo Silveira. He became the first martyr in Central Africa in 1561. The Portuguese claimed that the MUNHUMUTAPA had done a wrong thing by killing Silveira, a man of God. After realizing his sin, Negomo then killed his mother, who had influenced him. The Portuguese then sent a powerful army to invade the Mutapa state, as well as more missionaries to convert the Shona of the Mutapa. Now I want to look at the era of Gatsirusere, 1586 to 1623. After the disastrous Barreto's expedition, for a while the Mutapa appeared safe. However, by 1607, the state was torn by a civil war, and the ruler of the time, Gatsirusere, was forced into disastrous alliances with the Portuguese, who exploited the volatile situation. In 1590, the Mutapa state was attacked by Maravi groups or Maravi brigands from Malawi, who crossed the Zambezi. Gatsi was forced to seek aid from Portuguese to defend himself. The Maravi groups had previously attacked Portuguese traders along the Zambezi, so the Portuguese traders along the Zambezi were ready to assist Gatsirusere. But the Mutapa had to pay a high price in return for this. He was forced to allow Portuguese free access into his empire. Previously, they were supposed to pay some goods in Mutapa. The Portuguese were frequently called to the Mutapa state during the 17th century to suppress a revolution of vassal chiefs and Arab rulers. But the Portuguese did not cut this as a single group. For example, Simon Madeira at one point supported the Mutapa against another. There are quite a number of eras that existed within the Mutapa state. We have got Kapararidze era, that is 1623 to 1629. Mamvura Mande era, 1629 to 1631. We've got Philip I's era, 1632 to 1652. We've got Mukombwe, Philip II, 1663 to 1692. Now you need also to take note that Philip I, Philip II were black Munhumutapas, but they were Christian. In other words, they were given Christian names. That's why they are being identified as Philip I and Philip II. I want to look in detail on the political structure of the Mutapa state. So I'm going to start with the Mutapa capital. His court was known as Zimbabwe, which means a large house of stone. They were always made of poles and mud and grass thatch. During the 15th century and 16th century, the Mutapa enclosed themselves in stone walls. Later, Mutapa invariably built their Zimbabwe from mud and grass thatch, surrounded them with wooden fences. The Mutapa capitals were not at one point fixed. In other words, they were not at one fixed place. Each ruler was free to choose a new capital for his own. The early capitals of the Mutapa were frequently around Chitako Chakonya Hill and in Dedza region, in the Dande Musengezi region. Francisco de Sousa, the capital of Mutapa, was 6,179 meters in circumference, with houses built within a stone throw of each other, with the Mutapa having a compound excluding those of his wife and children. From the 16th century and 17th century, we are informed that the distance from the royal city were to be found at 8 minor palaces maintained by the chief wives of the Mutapa. I want to explore on the succession system. The problem of political succession is one which troubled many states throughout history. Periods of succession were anxious moments for all concerned because so high are the stakes, hazard in other words, for those involved, that often human life became an expendable human commodity. Out of the 28 succession that took place in 1692 and 1802, military force had to be employed, and 16 cases out of 3 were reasonably peaceful, and the remaining 9 were unknown. So this is how the succession system was so chaotic during this period. And when Mutapa died a natural death, chief ministers known as Nevinga immediately took over as regent for 3 days until a successor was chosen, after which Nevinga was to voluntarily commit suicide, and this custom was abolished by Mutapa Nyauma or Tower 5, who realized that many good men were reluctant to become Nevingas because of the requirement to commit suicide. Thereby, the tradition was actually abolished. At least other court dignitaries took charge of the funeral arrangements. The Mutapa was on his Zimbabwe. The Mutapa chose which of his wives were to be killed and buried with them in order to save in his life after death. So the death was actually a matter or a master of secrecy. After the Mutapa was buried, the people went through 8-day mourn known as Chiriro in Shona. The prince who succeeded the throne was generally one of the eldest sons of the former king and his chief wives who was legitimate. Some sources say the Mondoro spirit medium were consulted as to which prince was to succeed. Oral tradition point out that the brother could succeed another brother. I want to look at the role of chief ministers within the political realm in the Mutapa state. The Mutapa was assisted by a number of courtiers and officers. The routine matters of the state were dealt with the council, Dare, of the Mutapa, whom they chose from members of certain specified or families for or marriage base or on friendship basis. The council of the Mutapa was composed of chiefs, right? Then governor of province is Negomo. He was the second powerful man in the state. According to Dos Santos, in each village there was a governor who had authority to judge offenders. The chief minister was a household officer who stayed at court so that he could report on everything that happened. I want to look at the Captain General of the Armies. The Captain General of the Armies was also known as Mukono Hasha in Shona. He was always victorious on the field. In case of war, he was not necessarily sent as head of the armies, as the Mutapa could either appoint Nichinanga, who was the Captain General of the Army, or Boku Rumi of the Mwendambeheri, described as the Lieutenant General, to be in charge of the expedition or in charge of the army. Since the Mutapa had no standing army, we may assume that during peacetime the chief function of the Mukono Hasha was to advise the Mutapa on military affairs such as strategies and weaponry. The Steward or Treasurer in Shona Ambuya. During the 16th century, it was the duty of the Ambuya to name the chief wife of the Mutapa. The Ambuya was responsible for receiving all the presents brought to the Mutapa court and was in charge of the fazenda trade goods, that is cloth and beads, and used as salaries for the Portuguese in the Mutapa state. The function of the treasurer, that is Ambuya, clearly meant that she had to live at the palace. I want to explore on the chief musician, the role of the chief musician within this political realm. He was in charge of large troop of court musicians and the chief doorkeeper. During the 18th century, it is said that the Mutapa had 6 keepers of the gate who were part of this entourage. No one could see the Mutapa without passing through and explaining his business to the doorkeepers. The doorkeeper required great tact, fairness and discretion, and knowledge of the court, and above all, respect or loyalty to the Mutapa. We have also another component within the political realm of the Mutapa state, that is the chief confidant, son-in-law, or Boku Rumi. He was the right-hand man of the Mutapa itself. According to one source, the Boku Rumi was the chief son-in-law or brother-in-law of the Mutapa. The Boku Rumi could and was used in almost every role as confidant and close advisor in many issues. He had to stay in the court, at the court. Priesthood or diviners, the Mashikiro, the Ngangas, fall in this category. They saved the social life. They saved the religious aspect within the state, within the political structure. During the 18th century, the Mutapa had 3 priests named Netondo, Bushu, and Chikara. The Netondo's role was to hand over the state to Mutapa or provincial ruler at coronation. The Chikara was responsible for rain calling in the state, was the chief priest of Ziwaguru Shrine. I want to look at the role of bodyguards. They were used as executioners of any threats. Dos Santos described the bodyguards as being very brutal and bloodthirsty savages. The captain followed the Mutapa wherever he went and took turns to keep watch outside. In other words, the bodyguards were there to give security to the very important people in this respect, the Mutapas. The house where he slept, among their duties was administration of muteo or trial. I want to look at chief wives within the Mutapa state, and it's all about politics. The chief's wives were ranked in order of seniority. There was rank. The first wife was known as Mazarira, the second being Nehanda, the third Nyazvidza, the fourth Navemba, the fifth Nemangore, the sixth Nizinga Apanga, the seventh Nemangoro, the eighth Nesani, and the last one, that is the ninth one, was known as Necharunda. These were titles of the chief's wives. Now, not all of these wives stayed at the palace. This is one thing that people need to know. In the 17th century, only one wife stayed at the palace and served as a personal servant. The Mazarira and Nehanda were ritualistic wives, as they were usually sisters or other close relatives of the Mutapa. So the first and second wife were ritual wives of the Mutapa. This is the Shona culture, Shona custom within the ancient times. In other words, the Mazarira and Nehanda were ritual wives. They were sisters to the king. They were close relatives to the king. The Mazarira served as the spokesman for the Portuguese causes at the court, and Nehanda for Swahili traders. And this marks the end of the political structure of the Mutapa state. Now, having explored on the origins of the state, the economic organization and political structure of the state, I therefore want to explore on the fall of the Mutapa state. There are causes that led to the decline or the fall of the Mutapa state. Generally, the Mutapa state existed for 5 centuries, and in its history, historians have pronounced the state dying or died for many times. According to D.N. Beach, the end of the Mutapa state finally came after 1868. Now I want to explore on the decline of the state. I want to explain on how the state's power deteriorated. The empire had become too vast that the ruling Mutapas could not control it. By 1500, the state had occupied the territory under the Zambezi in the north and Save River in the south. So in order to control such a vast empire, the Mutapa needed to be strong and active. But according to Moyana, the rulers who came after Matope were not so strong and were unable to keep the empire united. So the period 1500-1828 was gripped by civil wars. You can easily tell in any scenario that the leadership is not active and strong when there is a lot of civil wars, a lot of infighting within the state, a lot of disorder. Then you'll be able to tell that the leader is not strong and active. So this saw the Mutapa's sons rebelling against him in the province of Barwe, Uteve, Manyika, Dande, and to disintegrate or break away from the state, from the main Mutapa, and this weakened the Mutapa overlordship over these areas, that is Barwe, Uteve, Manyika, and Dande. The Portuguese supported the Mutapas, that is Mamvura, Gatsiruseri. Weak rulers like Gatsiruseri and Mamvura called for Portuguese support. By 1607, the Mutapa state was torn by civil wars, and the ruling Mutapa Gatsiruseri was forced into disastrous alliance or understandings with the Portuguese, who exploited such situations using the divide and rule tactics. With the aid of the Portuguese, that crushed two Maravi groups which crossed the Zambezi Valley in the 1580s, the Portuguese caused a lot of disharmony within the state. Portuguese intervention also increased with the Portuguese desire to control gold and ivory trade. The Portuguese also brought into power cartoon leaders or puppet leaders like Mamvura, thereby weakening the state, and this led to the deterioration of the Mutapa body politic. Another factor which led to the decline of the Mutapa state is the Plaza system. The Portuguese cut themselves huge tracts of land which were under their rule. Plaza holders were not controlled by the Mutapa, and they also refused to pay tribute to the Mutapa, but the Mutapa now had to pay them. In other words, power had now shifted from its centers, that is from the Mutapas, to the Portuguese, who are now the masters of the empire. The reasons for cutting these huge lands, according to D.N. Beach, is that the Portuguese began to react to the threat of colonization by other European powers or states. Thus, they encouraged many new Plaza holders to claim as much as possible land on both banks of the Zambezi Valley. And in these Plaza centers, the Portuguese practiced their own power, their own hegemony. The local people were conscripted into armies known as the Chikundas. The local people were now paying tribute to the Portuguese, not the Mutapas. The local people were now under Portuguese power. They were now the Portuguese had power to enslave the local people, thereby weakening the state in terms of human resources. And the state was weakened as a result of this cruel system introduced by the Portuguese as a response to the colonization of Africa that was about to take shape. Another factor which led to the decline of the Mutapa state is the Mufekani, is the Ngoni incursions. The influence of the Mufekani in the 1830s caused the downfall of the state. Mutapa, Kandeya, and Dzeka faced a threat of Ngoni invasions in 1833. Mufekani was a great political upheaval in southern Africa. So in 1833, Zvangendava and Ngoni settled in south of the Mazowe River. After defeating both the Mutapas and Portuguese Plaza holders' force, the Zvangendava were later forced to cross the Zambezi River by another Ngoni group called Ngwane Maseko. The Ngoni of Zvangendava continued their flight in East Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi. The Ngwane Maseko and Kaba Ngoni also invaded the Mutapa Empire from the east near Tete, causing great political instability, but they were finally defeated by the Uyai African middlemen in the trade. And the Portuguese and Arabs, Ngwane Maseko, were forced to move northwards across the Zambezi. So the Nguni incursions disturbed the peace and prosperity within the Mutapa state, thereby weakening the state. The other factor which led to the decline of the Mutapa state is the Portuguese-Arab rival, the Portuguese-Arab grudges. The two groups competed for sources of gold and ivory and trade routes. This weakened the power of the MUNHUMUTAPA because he could not remain neutral, and the Arabs brought in guns to the Mutapa, which led to Mutapa-Portuguese War. There was also the issue of succession disputes. They were very common after the king's death because the succession system were not all that clear because of lack of birth records, whereby a woman could actually get impregnated before official marriage. And now questions were asked on who was the eldest son. And this is the root cause of succession disputes. So the Portuguese could fuel these succession disputes given this scenario. So they could play one after the other. And succession disputes occurred as a result of all this. The last factor on the decline of the Mutapa state is the murder of Father Gonzalo Surveillance. The religious Portuguese interference of the conversion to Christianity weakened the state because Muslim subjects did not agree with the conversion of the members of the ruling family. The Muslims influenced the Mutapa that Silveira was a witch, leading the Mutapa to order the execution of Silveira. It also led the Portuguese to invade the Mutapa state. So the state was now exposed to foreign intervention. This was the risk that was generated as a result of the jealousies that were brewed by Muslims against Christianity within the ruling family. And the state was not safe, as Portuguese always wanted to punish the Mutapas. So there are a lot of expeditions that were sent by the Portuguese kings to punish the Mutapas, and this weakened the state. In other words, in terms of political life, there wasn't political stability as a result of this. The final death knell came with the coming in of Cecil John Rhodes, who colonized Zimbabwe, and all the Mutapas were now subjects of Cecil John Rhodes. And the Mutapa state ended in 1890 when Cecil John Rhodes asserted his authority, and Cecil John Rhodes asserted British authority over the Zimbabwean plateau. However, this is subject to debate, as some historians tend to say the Mutapa state continued even during the time of colonization. Some even argue that the Mutapa state is still there. This is subject to debate. My name is Calvin Trevor Makomenke. I'm a history pundit. I teach history up to A level.